And now to the housing sector, where the supply is still far behind demand, like I mentioned to you earlier on, with only 100,000 new houses being built annually. This compared with the need for over 700,000 and an accumulated deficit of some 17 million homes for Nigerians. Of course, it's a worsening problem. We see that the housing sector is a major source of revenue and job creation in Nigeria, of course, other parts of the world. Industry analysts say that the market is over-regulated, and that has been a challenge for them. Last year, former President Goodluck Jonathan launched the Nigerian Mortgage Refinancing Company. What has been the state of this company? What achievement has it recorded in the last 1 year? And what is the way forward for Nigerians who are yet to have access to financing, to mortgages, and of course to be able to build their homes? Let's get more perspectives into what's going on, as I'm being joined in the studio by the CEO of Contemporary Group. He is Mr. Kester Ifeadi. Thank you, Mr. Ifeadi, for coming on the program.
Thank you, Bolaji.
I'm sure from the intro that I just read, the state of the housing sector is still some kind of concerns to Nigerians. So what's your view on the market?
Well, just like you said, a lot of work has to be done. There's so much work to be done. Some efforts have been made, like you said, the National Refinancing Mortgage Company. Lots of efforts have been made, but we still have some serious policy conflicts. The deficit is so much. I think it needs a serious government holistic approach to solving these problems. Like we all know, housing is one of the key drivers of growth all over the world. As a matter of fact, housing is second to agriculture in terms of employment generation, in terms of jobs creation. It's something that all over the world, housing sector is a major indicator of the strength and of economies of nations. What we need to do here is basically to refocus, look at what we have. The mortgage refinancing company is good. It's come at a good time, good effort. It's one of the components that have to be addressed to deal with the housing problems. But most importantly, the issues that have to do with affordability is of great concern.
We'll come to that.
Yeah.
But let's take a look. Let me take a step back. Let's look at the administration of former President Goodluck Jonathan. How do you think these issues were addressed under his administration? Well,
good effort was made. Like I mentioned, certainly the issue of setting up the Nigerian Refinancing Mortgage Company was a beautiful idea, because one of the problems we have with housing is finance, particularly in terms of high cost of finance and long-term finance. So that was a practical and strategic move to deal with that aspect. But having said all that, the issues of housing is beyond finance alone. Finance also has to properly dealt with beyond the setting of the Federal Refinancing Mortgage Company. They still have a lot of issues with finance that have to be dealt with. You have issues with land acquisition. You have issues with cost, like you say, over-regulation in the industry. You have lots of issues that have to do with construction methods, cost of construction and other materials. A lot of issues still need to be dealt with. Good effort, good beginning, but a lot of work has to be done.
Regulation, we'll get to that as well. But I just want us to look at the costs before we get to the regulation. It costs so much to build in Nigeria. Absolutely. When you compare with other sub-Saharan African countries like South Africa. For Nigeria, a three-bedroom apartment is said to cost $50,000. For South Africa, $36,000, and India, $26,000. Why is it so in Nigeria, given the prospect and the opportunities that we have to build low-cost houses without having to spend so much?
Yeah, the reasons are so obvious all over the place. I think it's all about potentials without harnessing the potentials that we have. For example, in Nigeria, we have a very serious policy deficit in terms of coherency in policy issues. Most of these nations you mentioned have a walk-through policy framework that guides housing delivery, right from land acquisition, government intervention in funding, strategic intervention in funding, which is very key. That's lacking in Nigeria. Investors and developers are exposed to very expensive funding costs. and you also have the issues of legal frameworks dealing with titles, approval issues. Sometimes you pay as much as 15% for paperwork to be able to commence construction, things that have to do with compensations. So many things that need to be dealt with that has not been dealt with here. That is why you have these issues. For example, if you look at all these things put together, if you have government proper articulation of framework to deal with them, can reduce housing costs by 40%. So it is obvious. We have a lot of work to do here in these areas in terms of harmonizing these issues and dealing with them in terms of how it affects the housing costs. For example, you look at housing delivery in Nigeria, it's still with all the huge potentials. This is the only nation in Africa where we still build with brick and mortar. If you want to deal with housing in a large scale, you have to do with mass housing. If you want to reduce cost of housing, you have to come with better methods of construction technology.
Seems to be an irony here.
Yeah.
We're seeing Nigerian companies expanding to other countries, and like Dangote Cement, which has opened shop in Zambia. We had it in Ethiopia. Now, with this expansion drive that some companies out of Nigeria to other parts of Africa and the world, shouldn't we put our own house in order in terms of having affordable raw materials to be able to build?
Absolutely. That's exactly what we're saying. We need to begin to look inwards. Building technology and building material technology is not rocket science. We as a nation, as big as Nigeria, we need to look at how we can strategize. How do we deal with affordable housing costs in terms of materials? This cement can be done locally, it's already done locally. Steel iron rods can be done locally, it's done locally. But in terms of even housing delivery, the technology to build, we need to begin to harness better ways of building mass housing. But most importantly, like I said earlier on, the biggest challenge we have in Nigeria is affordability threshold.
And that brings me to this question. How many Nigerians, from your assessment, have access to funding and have the homes, first of all? How many Nigerians do you think have the homes, especially those at the lower rung of the ladder? It may shock you to learn from little statistics at our disposal that as low as 5% of Nigerians have access to their own homes at the middle level. Middle level?
Absolutely. Because the affordability is not there.
So when we say low-cost houses, like many governments, state governments are doing, what criteria did they use to arrive at, churning out such a project, saying it's low cost, whereas having to access it, it's very expensive?
Yeah, I think it's important to bring some issues here for purpose of education in terms of information. The federal government has done some good things here by coming up with the National Housing Fund. That was supposed to be a window for accessing funding, particularly for middle-level manpower and populace, or rather probably low income. But again, you look at how it works and how it's been working. It's difficult, it's not sustainable. Because when people make little contributions, the law says 2.5% within 6 months, you are automatically qualified to own a house. But the issue is, how many people within this income range can afford these houses? So we need to deal with how to bring the cost of houses down. Be able to get to the affordability threshold for the average income Nigerians. That is why most Nigerians can own houses. And I need to also make it clear here that the serious housing problem is part of what's driving corruption all over the world. So places in the US and many places, even in Egypt, when you have a good job, you can own a house of your own. There are structures for which this can happen. These things are largely non-existent. So the issues about affordability and ownership for middle income, of course, the reasons are so obvious. These issues are things that continue to mitigate against housing.
How do you think the average Nigerian out there can access funding? Because the NMRC was launched last year by former President Jonathan. What do you think can be done to provide more avenues for Nigerians to own their own homes?
Well, first of all, foremost, Nigerians need to know what is on ground. Information is key. A lot of people don't know what the Nigerian Mortgage Governance Company means, Federal Mortgage Bank means, what are their roles. These are very wonderful intervention strategies by government.
There should be more enlightenment.
There should be more enlightenment. People need to understand how they can even access these facilities that you have or these institutions that you have on ground, because they are supposed to make financing easier. But like I said earlier, in beyond enlightenment, I think what we need to do, like I've told a couple of people several, is that we need to have a stakeholders forum where we can begin to reflect and review most of these policies and look at the issues that are militating against realizing the potentials of these policies. As long as we don't have a holistic approach, we will not be able to deal with them. This policy will be there, but it cannot produce the desired result. Issues that have to do with why do people not able, despite contributing in NHF, not able to access this funding. The funding is not there. Because the way it is structured.
So where is the money with the contributions? Where have they gone to?
Very good question. It is the structure of the policy. For example, if somebody contributes roughly 50,000 naira, the law says within 6 months is entitled to a loan to own a house. How much does this house cost? How easy it is? Where is the funding? The amount you contributed is so little as a pool to build. That is the reason why the issues of Nigerian Mortgage Finance Company was very good, because it helps expand the funding window. The Federal Mortgage Bank, of course, is doing its bits using the Advanced Housing Fund. But when you look at the pool of needs and the funds available, it is infinitesimal. We need to be more creative. I think what we need to do here is look at how we can deal with these issues and find out solutions. Why do these things, why is it not possible for people to own houses, despite all these things, all these institutions that are in place?
So that is a major task ahead for...
Very major task. And I also want to also recommend something else here. Beyond the stakeholders' approach, general review of the policies that we have, I think the state governments can also come in with... Lagos State has blazed the trail with the Lagos State ownership scheme. It's not just looking at the framework of National Housing Fund and all that. Lagos State has come up with his own hybrid format for building a policy to encourage Lagosians to own houses. Other states can come up with these kind of things. Look at your indigenous problems, look at your homegrown problems, and find unique solutions to solving the problems. There has to be a strategic government intervention to be able to deliver houses in a large scale. Finance infrastructure, road network, power. These are things that if it's taken off the cost of eventual houses. Site and services scheme, Lagos State has gone very far with it. It helps mitigate the cost of houses for the middle level power. Mass housing without government intervention is not possible. That's called social housing.
Okay.
That's part of why we're having the problem.
All right. Thank you so much. At this point, we have to end this conversation. Mr. Kester Ifeadi, a CEO at Contemporary Group. Thank you so much for coming
It's my pleasure.
on the program. We've been talking about the housing market in Nigeria. It is possible for you to own your own home. Perhaps if the government, the various governments at the various states are able to put in place policies to help accessing affordable houses in the country. We're back from this break. We will be taking you through entrepreneurship development in Nigeria. That's a key issue for economic growth. Stay with us.